From our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. Another busy day in the Alabama Legislature as the House and Senate met for the 9th legislative day. I was ahead of myself last night and in this morning's newsletter. It is indeed the 9th legislative day. We'll start with an issue that is garnering national headlines: in vitro fertilization, or IVF. On Friday, the Alabama Supreme Court ruled that frozen embryos could be considered children under Alabama law, at least as it concerns civil lawsuits. That led to UAB Health System and other clinics to halt their in vitro fertilization treatments as they weigh the risks of being sued as a result of the ruling. In 2018, the Alabama Legislature passed and voters ratified a constitutional amendment that made it the policy of the state to protect the rights of unborn children, which is in part what the ruling relied on. Today, state lawmakers began pursuing a legislative fix to the issue. State Senator Tim Melson, who chairs the Senate Health Committee, has filed legislation to protect IVF clinics by clarifying in the law that only embryos implanted in the uterus can be considered viable human life. I spoke with Melson about his bill earlier today.
Science has advanced so far that we have things pop up that were never intended to become a problem or a hindrance to the profession, but this is one of them. So I'm just trying to make it where a clinic, an in vitro fertilization clinic, can function without risk of liability or criminal acts in certain situations.
That full interview with Senator Melson later in the show. House Minority Leader Anthony Daniels has also filed a bill seeking to protect IVF clinics. In the Senate today, more than 7 hours of debate took place over one issue: diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI. Senate Bill 105 from Senator Will Barfoot of Montgomery would prohibit certain public entities, including K-12 schools and universities, from housing a DEI office or program. It would also prohibit the teaching or promotion of what's termed divisive concepts related to race and gender. Republicans argue that such DEI programs have led to colleges in other states promoting a woke ideology. Democrats push back aggressively, saying diversity, equity, and inclusion training is needed not just in college, but in other institutions, including the legislature.
Some have said, well, we don't see it here in Alabama. Why are we even talking about it? My response is, we have seen it, we have talked about it, and sometimes there's things we don't see that we don't get a chance to talk about. I've got articles here, some of them emails from constituents. They've said, here's what I've experienced.
I don't care how much you say I believe and think and all that crap. If you ain't walked in these shoes, you don't know nothing about what really happens when you walk in these shoes. And yet you're making a bill that's supposed to be taking into account the problems I have to walk in the shoes, and it's being told to you by our majority leader and by his staff and everything what the problems are when we walk in these shoes, and then it's being discarded.
You know, I'm a new member of the Senate, but I've been around for a long time. And you have a bill that's introduced, the next day it ends up being in committee, and then we don't even get it for our committee until 4 o'clock or so that night. I mean, my phone started just going crazy Tuesday night, just from advocacy groups, from folks that wanted to have the opportunity to have a public hearing and talk about this piece of legislation.
We've tried to take steps in this bill to show that the state of Alabama is not going to stand for that. You're not going to divide us on race. You're not going to divide us on color. You're not going to divide us on ethnicity, national origin. Some people have said that this bill is divisive itself. I'd argue with you about that.
After a prolonged filibuster, the bill ultimately passed along party lines 26-7. It now goes to the House. In the House, movement on school choice legislation that is a top priority of Governor Ivey and legislative leaders. House Bill 129 from State Representative Danny Garrett is dubbed the Choose Act. It would allow families up to $7,000 a year in tax credits to fund a student's private school tuition or other choice options. The House Education Budget Committee made some changes to the bill today, including capping the total amount that could be credited at $500 million and requiring private schools who participate to share testing data with parents and the state.
It will allow for parents to be able to use a portion of their tax dollars to fund alternative education opportunities that are other than the schools for where they're zoned. So, for example, a public school student could go to another public school and pay tuition if that is an option and is required. A public school student could use this funds to go to a private school, to a church school, to a smaller school, to a school that better meets their particular needs, whether it be academic or emotional or social or health. A homeschool family could use a portion of their tax dollars to pay for education expenses.
I oppose the bill for a number of reasons, but I really do applaud the sponsors and the governor because we all need to focus on education, but I'm not sure this is the right way to do it. Simply because the people that I represent and those that live in the Black Belt, they won't have an access to the choice because the choices are not there. In some of our urban areas, you have parents who, don't have the wherewithal to be able to maneuver the bureaucracy to be able to obtain one of the school vouchers. In the rural area, what do you do if you have one school?
The committee advanced that bill, and it now goes to the full House. Advocates gathered at the Capitol today to rally for greater access to affordable child care. Manufacture Alabama and the Women's Foundation of Alabama have joined forces to promote legislation that would offer tax credits to businesses and workers for child care. They say it is a critical component to increasing the state's workforce participation rate.
This is our opportunity to bring together hundreds of women from all parts of this great state to talk about the issues that matter most to Alabama's economy through the lens of how they are experienced by women in Alabama. Child care does work, and Alabama will work when she works for women.
In 2022, 85,000 hard-working Alabama families needed access to child care, but no quality or affordable options in the communities were available. That's something that we plan on changing this session.
This piece of legislation that we're looking at to address the child care shortage in the state of Alabama, expanding access and opportunities for families all across the state of Alabama. Mothers and families that have had to make a decision between going into the workforce and breaking even to pay for child care or staying home with their child. No mother and no family in this state or in this country should have to make a choice between breaking even to pay for child care or staying at home.
This year in the legislature, we're committing to removing obstacles that prevent Alabamians from entering the workforce and unleashing their full potential, especially women. The best way for us to doing that is supporting parents, especially mothers. No one should have to choose between caring for their child and providing for their family. It's time to invest in an industry that keeps Alabama working. That is childcare.
Today was Higher Education Day here at the State House. Thousands of college students and university administrators marched and rallied to urge lawmakers to support higher education. SGA presidents from the state's 14 public colleges and universities signed a pledge to work together to promote higher ed.
What we're going to do here today is we're going to have a real quick opportunity for all of our elected officials to hear about how we want to work together to make Alabama a better place, right? And we know that universities have a role in making that happen, right? So to show our solidarity and show our willingness to work together, your SGA presidents and your mascots are here to make a symbolic statement We believe in Alabama, and we are part of the team.
Listen, you all are so important to us. You're our future. We want to do everything we can to be able to support your universities and support you individually to be able to be all that you want to be. As I've talked to students today, I've talked to art majors, I've talked to accountants, I've talked to those that want to be nurses and physicians, and every other category. And wow, we need you desperately to continue to pursue and be successful in what you're doing with your educations so you can be great productive citizens to help all of us moving forward in Alabama.
Y'all are our future. When you look at what's going on right now in Alabama, it's amazing. You know, the economy's the best it's been in years. And when you talk about opportunity, I talk to businesses all over, talk to people, and they want to continue to move to Alabama because of the businesses that are here, but more important, the people. And, you know, my message to y'all is y'all are our future. Continue to, you know, make sure you dive in on your major. And then we want you in Alabama after you graduate so you can make a difference.
Coming up next, my interview with Senator Tim Melson about his legislation on in vitro fertilization. We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts. Keep up with what's happening with Capital Journal.
Welcome back to Capital Journal. Joining me next is State Senator Tim Melson from Florence. Senator, thanks for coming on Capital Journal.
Thank you for having me.
And I have to say, it's great to see you in such good health, and I want to talk about that later, but it really is good to see you back.
Well, I appreciate that. It's good to be back.
I do want to talk about that, but there is some breaking news to talk about. Legislation you're filing having to do with this IVF issue. Obviously, the Alabama Supreme Court had this monumental ruling on Friday that stated that embryos, frozen embryos, could be considered children under the law, and that's really impacted the in vitro fertilization industry.
Sure.
You know, UAB says it's halting its practices. So you filed legislation concerning this. Tell me what it does.
Well, this bill simply made it where in vitro fertilization that you may have stored embryos, but they're only potential life. They don't become life till they're implanted in the uterus and adhere to the wall, and then they become life. I'm not saying or trying to devalue the sanctity of them, embryos. I get that. I know it's a touchy subject, but I'm just saying that for the purpose of saying there's any viable life, that it's not until it's implanted in the uterus. I mean, you know, you really, we have, science has advanced so far that we have things pop up that were never intended to become a problem or a hindrance to the profession, but this is one of them. So I'm just trying to make it where a clinic, an in vitro fertilization clinic, can function without risk of liability or criminal acts in certain situations.
Yeah, 'cause that's the problem, right? It's, you know, this was a civil lawsuit, and so any clinic out there, especially, you know, UAB, one of the largest hospitals in the country, that's the risk. If they, you know, if an accident happens, or, you know, if something happens to these fertilized eggs, they could be sued, and that risk alone would prevent, you know, anybody from wanting to do business, or from an insurer coming. So are you confident if your bill makes it through the process and becomes law, it would fix that problem?
Well, until the next problem popped up. But the goal is to, yes, make it where it's not a liability or not worth the risk versus benefit of the procedure, because the patients really need this procedure, the ones that have had fertility issues and want to be parents, but nature didn't bless them with the simple path that a lot of people happen, and they have to go this extreme measures to have a successful pregnancy.
Yeah, and it strikes me because obviously when you talk about abortion bans and the constitutional amendment and things like that, they're pro-life, right? It's a pro-life movement, and yet this is preventing folks from having babies.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of ironic.
Yeah.
But is it safe to say that, I remember 2018 when the constitutional amendment went forward. I remember 2019 when the abortion ban went forward, which obviously those two pieces of law in the Constitution are part of what led to this case. Is it safe to say, though, that was not intended to ban IVF or anything like that?
No, it wasn't intended to have situations such as, let's say a transporter was traveling with embryos to a facility. Let's say a person caused an accident. Now we have to worry about vehicular homicide, or manslaughter. We don't want to have those situations where people doing their job and normal accidents happen are at a criminal or even really civil liability to the point that it's, it hinders the process. We have Mobile that has a hurricane. Let's say a tornado comes through Birmingham, and somewhere, let's say a generator goes out and they thaw out. Well, there's acts of God that, you shouldn't be held accountable for. And I don't think the intent was ever there to hinder this process. It's done a lot of good. I had a lady come in today and see me, and she was on her second pregnancy, both of them by IVF, and she had tears in her eyes. She was so thankful because she has 2 embryos in storage right now. And
wow.
She's worried what happens. I'm not trying to take it lightly, but one day, is that going to be child abandonment? Is it going to be child support for keeping them frozen? It's these sort of things that have advanced beyond our expectations are going to have to be addressed in the future.
Well, it affects real people. It's a
Absolutely.
real issue.
And these normal, I have seen these couples to be, just really young couples trying to have, or people that are middle-aged that have had issues getting pregnant, and they just want to have a chance to have a normal, healthy child.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll watch the bill going forward. Obviously, this is a very hot issue, even nationally.
Sure.
And I should also mention, I ran into Representative Terry Collins, who was the author of that abortion ban,
right,
who said she's also committed to a fix, working with you on that.
Yeah.
Well, I said I wanted to talk about your health. So just to kind of set the stage here, you went through a health episode while traveling in Korea.
I did.
Tell us what happened.
Well, I can tell you what I remember happening.
Okay, sure.
I don't even remember going to Korea, but we were on the AKEP, which is Alabama Korean Economic Partnership, and Educational and Economic Partnership. Great program. I went with Senator Orr, former Senator Dow, Donnie Chastain, Steve Livingston, and Bobby Singletary. Sorry. And we were going over there for state meeting, and the next thing I remember is waking up in a hospital with my daughter there. And it was one of those adventures that I wouldn't wish to happen on anybody, but I'm very fortunate. The people with me didn't panic when it happened. I went to a restaurant and supposedly or a coffee bar shop and had a full arrest.
It's a heart attack.
Yeah, well, yes, and no blockage, just electrical. A really fluke situation. And they didn't panic, and they stayed calm, and they began CPR and worked quite a long time, 40-something minutes, I was told, and saved my life, and I'm very grateful.
Senator Orr himself, performing CPR on you for that long.
Yeah, well, he wasn't by himself.
Okay.
Ken Tucker at West Alabama, which I'm very grateful for. All of them worked together, but my understanding is definitely Arthur Orr took the lead, and very grateful.
Well, that's scary, but it has a happy ending, and now you two have legislation that would require CPR training for high school students, right? This would potentially save other lives.
Oh yes, I think it's just a great program that actually Senator Orr was the editor and the writer, and I'm very grateful he asked me to co-sponsor. It's a way to save lives in the future, and I think that's very important. You never know. I mean, I never dreamed I would be overseas and have this happen to me, and teaches them in CPR how to use a defibrillator and other things. So I appreciate him doing that.
Yeah. Well, and you were remarking on the quality of care there in Korea, that the health care is excellent.
Oh, it was second to none. I mean, I had things done to me in a very rapid response time. that, I don't think, I could have been any care in the U.S., better care in the U.S. It was, I won't go into the details, but they put, ECMO and aortic balloon pump and ventilator and did great care. Language barrier, but it was great care. So
yeah, well, that's quite a story, and we're going to watch that legislation going forward, and it'll be interesting maybe when it comes to the floor in the Senate, you and Senator Orr can kind of tell that story about why you're why you're pushing this legislation.
Yeah, he's very modest about it, but he did a great job.
Wow. While I have you, you do also have this legislation concerning the state health officer. This has kind of been political football a little bit. Tell me what your legislation does.
Well, my legislation does a couple of things. One, currently it gets rid of the State Board of Health because that's just massive members. They only meet once a year, and there's just no need for it. Now the Alabama Committee of Public Health is a little different. It's people that are assigned to positions by different entities. Mine changes it up. Currently, Massa had 12 appointments. It brings it down to 4 that they appoint. The total number of doctors go down from 12 to 10. The 2 that it changed over, one's appointed by the Ag Commissioner and the other by the Governor, or is the Governor, depending on their choice. At any time, if there's questions about their decisions, the Lieutenant Governor, the Pro Tem, or the Speaker can ask for an opinion from the committee as to his actions. Were they appropriate, inappropriate? If they were inappropriate, what are the suggestions, recommendations? Is there any, I'll just use the word punitive actions, which not mean it in a bad way, but just mean that, what do we need to do? I mean, I can't imagine anything that would get to the point they need to be removed. But in this way, it's kind of like a hospital that has a doctor that needs to be reevaluated. An executive committee comes together in hospital situations of his peers, determine his behavior and his actions and recommendations. Well, this committee will do the same thing. And the thing about this committee, they are the ones that make and review all the health decisions already. Like if oyster beds closed, restaurants closed. He brings a report every month and they review his actions if they so desire, depending on the severity of them. Well, it'll be the same thing here in those situations. And the only thing the governor has to do is, in my bill, is sign off within 24 hours on any emergency actions, on statewide emergency actions. So I just think it has a little bit more accountability. That's very brief. A little more details is that the other doctors are picked by their specialties, like the American College of Academy of OBGYN would pick that person's specialty up. They would know their peers would also determine who's the best in the state to help with that if they're willing to serve. It just mixes it up for more accountability, more questioning of his actions, and I think it's a move in the right direction. So
yeah. Do you think it will take some bring the temperature down a little bit on post-COVID? There was so much chatter and just political talk concerning the health officer, concerning the board. Do you think it'll tap down some of that?
Probably. I would hope that people realize that right now the average tenure for a state health officer is 13 months.
Wow.
That's how bad COVID wore them down. We frequently think that Dr. Harris made a lot of decisions based on his own, but everything was run by the cabinet and the governor prior to implementing, is my understanding. So I hope that it does. We came out of the COVID, and if you look at the indicators, we came out way ahead on a lot of things that we all were proud of. Economically and other key measures show that we survived the COVID pretty well. Mm-hmm. People didn't like having their freedoms taken away, their choice of stores, things like that. Hopefully this is a once in a lifetime type issue, but we'll be more prepared in the future to handle these situations.
Yeah, I mean, hindsight 2020.
Yeah.
And when we had Dr. Harris on the show, I mean, for almost every day and every week for a long time.
Right.
And yeah, that really wore on him. That's a big job to have, lots of decisions, and then to be criticized so much. It really did wear on him.
And I get it. I mean, you think about it, when you start infringing on what people feel their liberties, it's just the way we do these, handle these situations. But overall, we came out fairly well, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're out of time. Thanks again for coming on the show, and we'll be following these bills going forward.
I appreciate you having me. Good to see you.
Yes, sir. We'll be right back.
As the first incorporated town in Alabama, Huntsville played an important part in the birth and growth of the state. Settled in 1805, the fertile lands lured English-speaking pioneers migrating to the Mississippi Territory. Huntsville became the center of early state politics and served as the interim first capital of the state of Alabama. Present-day Huntsville is best known as one of the South's leading technology hubs.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow night at 7:30 for Capital Journal's Week in Review. For our Capital Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. Let's close out the show with more sights from Higher Ed Day here at the Capitol. We'll see you next time.